Welcome to this week's episode of Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast presented by our good friends over at ScentLock. Guys, today I've got a super fun episode. I've got Chad Jones on, who is just an absolute big buck killer in the state of Texas. He's killed several deer over 150, over 180, and even his best of 233 inches. We talk about a lot of things. We talk about how to use the pictures that you're getting in summer when it comes to fall and nailing down those deer. We talk about being patient as a hunter and going in only at the right times and what those right times look like. We talk about our shared hatred for poaching and the impact that it has on a hunting community as a whole and on a deer herd as a whole. And we talk about the incredible story. It's a phenomenally fun story, exciting story about his 233-inch deer that played out just incredible. So, guys, make sure and stay tuned in right here to hear that incredible story and more, and learn how you too can kill bigger deer and learn how to nail down those bigger deer this fall. But guys, I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, where hunters new and old come to learn and find inspiration from stories of hunts gone by. Everyone is welcome to enjoy the outdoor way of life, and there is no better time to start than right now. So let's head into the great outdoors with your host, Dylan Ray.
Guys, I don't need to tell you about the blazer vane. You're probably familiar with the blazer vane, and you're probably familiar with boning. Boning has been around forever. It's a name you can trust. They sell products you can trust. They have everything that you need to build your own arrows. All of the jigs to fletch your own arrows, all of the vanes, all of the wraps, countless, numerous types of vanes and wraps to build any kind of configuration you want. They also have some really cool Fredbear branded products with their Fredbear camo wraps and their Fredbear flannel wraps. Something that's really cool about that Fredbear flannel, that's actually a photo that was taken of one of Fredbear's flannel famous shirts, the red and gray and black that he always wore. That's actually a photo taken of his personal shirt and put on a wrap. It looks really cool, especially on some traditional arrows. But my very favorite configuration, and this is coming from an arrow junkie that's tried out all different kind of vanes and all different kind of configurations, I have found that this configuration stabilizes pretty much every arrow. It's whisper quiet. They fly fantastic. The 3-inch Bronco vane in a 4-fletch absolutely flies like a dart, whether you're shooting mechanicals or big fixed. This is going to be a fletching configuration that will work. Again, whisper quiet, long range accuracy. I love this configuration. This is on every single one of my compound arrows. They just work. Guys, I would highly encourage you to check out boning, not just for the blazer vane, but for the heat vane, for the Broncos, for the X vanes. Everything that you need to build your own arrows is right there on Boning's website. They've been around for ages, and I promise you, if you order from them, you're going to get products that you can trust. All right, Chad. So you have kind of made it a habit of just absolutely killing giant deer. So wanted to have you on. When does your season open up there in Texas?
So it'll be October 1st is when archery season starts for us, which will actually be that's actually going to fall on I don't even know. It's pretty bad that I don't know that right. Actually, looks like it opens September 30th this year.
Very cool.
It's always the first weekend of October.
Well, I just wanted to have you on, man, and kind of talk about killing big whitetails and kind of how you strategize for that with season approaching quickly. Mine opens here on the 14th, so I'm pretty stoked for that. And then Oklahoma October 1st, and so I'm ready to hit the ground running. But are you a big early season guy, or do you kind of wait for it to cool off and hit the rut?
Well, so if that tells you anything, when I didn't even know for sure what day opening weekend was, dude, I haven't hunted opening weekend. Man, I can't even remember. I mean, it's been several years. And a lot of the reason for that is, it's hot, and a lot of times the deer are moving mainly at night when it's still cool. And so unless there's just a specific buck that I'm trying to pattern or that I'm trying to target, unless he's patternable, then most of the time I normally won't go hunt until about the week before Thanksgiving. You know, normally around like October 17th, 19th, that's like the start, really the hard start of the pre-rut for us. And that's when I'll start going and hunting and hunting the mornings. But other than that,
November?
I mean, yeah, I'm sorry. What did I say?
You said October 17th.
Yeah, no. Yeah. October 17th.
You said a week before Thanksgiving, and then you said October.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, a week before Halloween. Yeah, sorry, probably threw you off there. A week before Halloween, so around the 17th, 19th of October is when our pre-rut starts. So that's when I'll normally start going out and hunting. Like I say, unless you know, through September I've got a buck that I want to shoot that's real patternable coming in all the time, then normally I don't even go until conditions are right. We have a cool front, you know, or the pre-rut's got them daylighting more than normal.
Now, you said if you've got one particular buck, are you the kind of hunter that, like, you know, you have one buck and that's the one you want to kill this year, or do you just have, you know, 5 or 6 shooters, or are you more of like a, hey, I know there's big deer in here, and when one comes out, I'm going to kill it?
Man, it's weird. You know, so I hunt primarily in Collin County, you know, which is like 30 miles south of the Oklahoma border. So it's far north Texas. And, you know, it's a 1-buck county. And so, but the genetics for the deer here are unbelievable. And so I normally every year I get some really, really nice deer on camera. And so sometimes it just kind of depends. You know, I'll get some mega giants show up, but they're not local deer. You know, they might be traveling a long ways away. And so I'll get a sporadic picture, like one picture of them, like a month or something. Those bucks typically aren't killable for me, right? You know, because I'm not close to their bedding area, not close to their core property. And so, you know, I would just be kind of hanging on a limb to expect that I can hunt and he just show up at just the right time during the rut, which is possible. I mean, it happens to hunters all the time, but I really like having a game plan going into it, not just hope that I get lucky. So most of the time, you know, I do a lot of scouting throughout the summer, do a lot of mock scrapes, which starts getting me inventory of when all the bucks are in bachelor groups. And then I kind of start deciding from what I'm seeing, you know, what buck I really want to pursue. And sometimes it's maybe one of the most mature bucks or one of the ones that has, you know, some crazy cool character on it or something like that, that makes me want to pursue it. And so I've kind of done that for a while now, and it's getting to be, I guess it's getting to be a perception that people expect me to shoot a big deer. And so it starts to put a lot of pressure and a lot of stress on me, feeling like that's what I need to do to be successful in people's eyes. You know, instead of going, man, you know, he's shooting a 125-inch deer, even though it might be an old mature deer that's just maxed out. You know, so really this year I want to try to get back to just enjoying hunting and enjoying being outdoors and not making it so much of a challenge of the ideal success of dragging a monster out. If I kill one, great, but I don't want it to consume my life, because it's gotten that way in the past, where I have a specific buck in mind and I pass a lot of really good ones and spend a lot of hours just trying to get that opportunity with a good one. And when it pays off, it's great. But when it doesn't, you're kind of like, man, you know, it's all for nothing, because you don't know. I mean, you got neighbors that might shoot them, might get hit by a car, you know, end up 7-10 miles down the creek or down the road, you know. So it just kind of depends, you know. Each season is a little different, but yeah, typically I like to find one, and normally it's always the biggest one, right? And that's what I want to try to get a game plan to see if he's killable.
Now, you mentioned, well, I've got several questions that kind of came from that, but summer scouting, you mentioned doing a lot of scouting in summer. What are you doing? I mean, if you have a deer that you have nailed down in the summer, how does that correlate to how you're going to hunt him in October, November? How are you using summer scouting to pin him down in the rut in early October, whatever? Because I mean, they completely change from summer to fall. So how are you using that in order to nail down those deer?
Well, the first thing is finding out the deer's there, right?
Yeah, bingo.
And I always tell people this from the beginning is, they're like, man, how do you kill big deer? I mean, you have to hunt an area that has big deer. And, if you don't have the genetics, you're just hoping that one's maybe, the freak of a genetic pool that blows up into something. But, we've got really good genetics. Still a lot of ag fields. So we have really, really good deer. So the first thing I do is when I go out early summer is, I'll start making mock scrapes, putting on trails. And once the bucks get in bachelor groups, then I start getting inventory of really all the bucks in the area. Now, granted, going into right about this time of year right now, they'll start rubbing the velvet off and not be best friends anymore, and they'll kind of start splitting up. But a lot of these deer don't move as far away from that area you're seeing them in the summer is what a lot of people think. A lot of the dispersal of them is, I think probably Labor Day weekend is, especially for here in Texas, is like the trademark. Hey, we got to go to the lease and set up stands and fill feeders and cut shooting lanes and these work weekends. I'm the exact opposite. All my stands have been hung, shooting lanes trimmed, mock scrapes done, trails cleared out, all by the end of July. And so that way, when people are coming in right now with a few weeks left before the season and they're disturbing all these areas while bucks are still in bachelor groups, it's bumping them out of those spots, right? And so what I want it to be is they get bumped over onto my properties where there's no scent, there's no human intrusion, nothing for months. And so it gives me a huge advantage. And then it's just a matter of me picking the right wind, the right conditions to slip in there and hopefully get one that I'm after. That's not always the case. It doesn't always bump them onto my property. It could bump them, down the creek or to other adjacent properties. But I try not to go in at all from this point forward.
Gotcha.
And so, like I say, you'll see posts that I make. All of my stand hanging, all that stuff has been done since July 30th.
Now, you say you wait till the conditions are right, but you also say you wait until, the week before Halloween. So what conditions, what has to happen for you to go, okay, it's only October 1st, but I have to get in there because I'm going to kill him. You know what I mean?
Well,
what are you looking for to, like, the red flag to say, all right, I got to get to the woods. No matter what day it is, I'm going.
Well, so I would say, if I have a food source where, I'm like clockwork every day, at say, 4:45 or 5 o'clock, a buck that I'm wanting to shoot is showing up in daylight and hitting a food source, then depending on the stand I have set or in the food source, the location of it, I'll certainly go in and hunt opening day, opening weekend, or whatever, as long as the wind's right and they're patternable. But a lot of the deer that I hunt are real sporadic. It's very unusual, especially some of the more mature bucks, that they're coming every single day. You know what I mean? And so what I don't want to do is just go sit every day and go, well, every third day he shows up, so I'm going to go sit every day until he shows up. And now I'm blowing that location out. I'm getting my scent on the ground.
Yeah.
I don't want to alert any deer at all. And so really until they're daylighting, coming to a mock scrape, or I just have a major cool front come through that I know is going to get them up on their feet and moving around in daylight, then it's hard. Trust me, it's hard to sit and watch them on camera and you see them and you're like, man, I know I should have went kind of deal. But, big mature bucks, a lot of times you only get that one opportunity. And if you're screwing it up by going in there and hunting that same spot all the time, you may not be directly educating that buck He might not see you walk to the stand or getting down or smell your scent where you come and gone in, but other deer do. And then when those deer react to that pressure, those mature bucks notice it and they'll do the same thing. And so it becomes a game of cat and mouse and just trying to outsmart some of the smartest ones out there. They don't get big for no reason.
Now, just so people know what you're talking about, I mean, you've killed how many deer over 180?
So I've shot one over 180. I've shot one that was 233 inches. And I've shot 4 170s. Last year I shot a 163. The year before that I shot a 151 8-point. So it's all over the place.
Yeah.
But
you're
right
killing
now
giant deer.
They're pretty good sized deer. And the funny part is a lot of times they're not even the target buck. They're not the biggest one. The year before last, there was another 200 incher that I was after, but he wasn't local to me. I had one video of him walking under my stand on November 17th at 1:30 in the afternoon, and never had another picture of him. And, and so a deer like that, it's like, oh man, I would love to shoot him and hit another 200 incher, but he's not killable to me. I would have had to have been sitting in the stand on that perfect day, that perfect time. The wind condition actually wasn't good for me in that stand, which is probably why he come through there. So even if I would have been sitting there, it probably wouldn't have panned out. But you always have those one-offs. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes you get lucky and you're sitting there and a buck shows up that you've never seen before, and you seal the deal. And it's like, man, this is incredible. But that's not, I don't bank on. Right. I try to create my luck, not just hope I get lucky.
Well, and that's what I've learned over the years of the guys that kill the big deer don't just hunt to hunt. And that takes a lot of maturity, because, myself, when I was growing up and, in my young adult life, if it was season, I was hunting somewhere, doing something. I was wanting to shoot does, or I just wanted to be in the woods. I wanted to have my bow in my hands in the woods. But then you realize, you're like, man, these guys that are killing giants, they only went out 3 times and killed the giant. And you're like, oh, they're just lucky. Well, no, they just wait until the conditions are right to go kill that deer. And so first off, in my opinion, if you get a freezing cold October day, be in the woods. Don't ever miss a massive cold front in October, because deer are starting to get a little horned up. They're starting to think about does. And when you get a freezing cold October, oh my Lord. I mean, even if it's a day and a morning, but last year we had one of the coldest fronts I've ever seen in October. And, it got down to 20 and dumped snow, towards the beginning of October. And I saw more bucks. It was outrageous. It was insane. I had, bucks bedding down 20 yards in front. It was just a crazy hunt. And I picked the wrong stand, because I get a picture of my target buck at another stand during that same time. But still, never miss a freezing cold October. But what do you think? What do you think makes? Well, before I get onto that, I just want to encourage you guys. I understand wanting to hunt just to go hunt, because we only get a few months to do this out of the year. But don't go into your number one spot just to be hunting. Go to a spot where, hey, I know some does might cruise by here and I might get a shot at some. Go to an observation set where you can just watch the deer from afar and help you when you go into your number one spot. But don't just go into your number one spot just to be hunting. Go, have a couple secondary spots, have a couple observation sets where you can just go and be in the woods and enjoy the deer, and not booger up and educate your deer at your number one spot. You keep talking about deer being patternable and not being patternable. What do you think makes deer? Because I'm the same in my area, my leases, you can't put a pattern on them. Whereas my spot in Oklahoma, dude, it's like clockwork. The deer showing up at 7:14, whatever. Within a 5-minute span, I know when he's showing up. What do you think makes deer that way?
Pressure.
Really?
Pressure. Yeah.
So even on a spot, because you've said your spot, you're out of there for 3 months. So, your spot should be not pressured.
Right. So, and it's funny because I've been posting quite a few deer right now coming to mock scrapes, and it's every day. I mean, these deer are coming to it every day. Now, most of them are at night, but it's every day, and that's always a good sign when they're coming all the time, is because there's no pressure. And I use all cell cameras, so I don't have to go back in there. They're all solar panels, so I don't have to go in to replace batteries, pull SD cards, none of that. And so, so the first time I'll go back in there will be when hunting season starts. And so, and I've got one mega giant. I don't share or post pictures of him. He's kind of my number one for this year. But it's sporadic. I'll get a picture once every couple of weeks. So I know that he's not real close by, but it's also hot. And the deer aren't moving a whole lot either. And so a lot of times you'll have deer that, might be bedding on your property or adjacent property that you never even know they're there, just because they don't have to get up and move much. As long as they've got food, water, and cover, then, it's just tough to say. Places are different, but most of the time it's pressure. If they're not patternable from food to bedding. And whether they're having to cross highways or
the highways, roads. I think a lot of it has to do with when deer have so many food sources that it's different. Like in Oklahoma, they've got one food source, so that's why they're getting there at 7:14 on the dot every day. Whereas my spots in Kansas, I mean, they've got beans over here and Milo over here, or corn over here, and so they just kind of go different places to eat at different times. It's like a buffet. So it's not like we've got to go hit the food plot at 7:15 every morning. This morning they might hit the Milo. This morning they might hit beans. This morning they might. So that's kind of what I think.
And that kind of, I guess, indirectly relates to pressure, though, right? Is that still a form of pressure for deer if they have competition to get to that food source before it's all gone, whether it be, like here, I've got a lot of wild pigs. And so the deer are trying to get there to that feeder before the pigs do, because they know there's not going to be any food left. Yeah. And so it's still a form of pressure to the deer. It's still a form of stress to them. It's not as noticeable early season, just because they're not needing to. I mean, there's so much vegetation right now. They don't really have to go to a food plot. They don't have to go to a feeder or corn or grain or anything, or beans. When they can find, grasses and things to eat all over the place, it's not as noticeable than when everything dies off, acorns rot out, and there's no food source. Then everything's coming to your supplemented food, right? Which is your food plots and feeders.
Well, that's why, I live for the day that I see the farmers come in, and I'm like, yes, they're cutting all the Milo, they're cutting the beans, they're cutting the corn, whatever. I live for those days because my cameras start lighting up, and it just gets so much better. But also, it's also really hard, if you're sitting on a tree row here in Kansas, and you've got a field of Milo. There's nothing to keep the deer hugging the tree line, so you can get a close shot. They could be anywhere in that Milo. So, like right now, my cameras are going off, and you'll see a deer, 100 yards off in the Milo, and you can't even really tell what it is because you're looking through all the Milo to get to see it. But right now they have hundreds of acres of food, so they don't stay in the cover and stay close to the tree line, and so it gets really difficult.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because, I've hunted Kansas the last couple of years, and I didn't get drawn this year, so I won't be going back this year. But hunted Kansas the last couple of years, and the hunting is so much different. I've hunted in Illinois. It's just so much different there when you have just little pockets of cover, because there's no other place for deer to hide than those. So where the deer are, and then if you kind of like what you're referring to, if you get between the bedding and the food, then you're in the game, right? But the problem is when there's so much food that you're going, well, now there's not a distinct trail of where they're going. But once all that's cut and you have a destination food source, you know, I'll be honest with you, like I was shocked at how much easier hunting is in Illinois, in Kansas, places where you have little isolated pockets of cover, because it funnels the deer. I mean, they had trails that look like cattle trails, and every deer just piled right down at one right after the other. And so, you know, versus where I'm at, it's pretty dense, cover all over. Deer come from any direction. They're normally not together other than like doe herd groups. They wander around aimlessly. There's not like any distinct trails all that often. Most of the time, if we see beat down trails, it's from pigs, which do follow each other in a line. But it's just different, you know. But yeah, I mean, to your point, I think all of it really relates to food and stress for deer. You know, I will say I don't see very many big mature bucks come to feeders at all. I've actually never killed a big buck at a feeder.
Really?
Mm-mm.
Why do you think that is? The competition of food, or?
No, it's they understand at an early age of what feeders mean, you know, and I think as they get older, they don't like the sound of them. Now, gravity feeders, I'll have bigger bucks eat out of gravity feeders, but anything that makes that sound, you know, normally you have deer that is like a dinner bell. You'll see does and younger bucks come running into it, but the big bucks, they shy away from it. It's funny, you know, for the past few years, I've actually a good location where I knew there were big mature bucks, I would put a feeder out, and then I would put a corn pile out. They would come and eat that corn pile all day long and skirt around that feeder every time. And this feeder had been there for years. And it's just, and if they do eat at it, it's only at night. And during the rut, they would come skirt around it just to scent check. They really would never eat at it. And so it's just, I don't know, they're very weary here. And I don't know if that's just because, you know, it's just a lot of pressure. I mean, I have a lot of hunters on some of the properties around me, you know, so I have to get real creative on big bucks because I'm not the only one that's seeing them. I know other people see them, you know, and then that adds more pressure because I'm sitting there going, okay, this buck is killable. He's showing up daylight. I know he's in my area sporadically at least, you know, and I want to go in and kill him. But now I have to also weigh the factor that it's not just on my terms. I'm also having to think about all the other hunters that are going to hunt, you know, to sit, thinking, oh, today might be the day, even though they might be sitting in a completely bad wind direction from where these bucks bed. And, you know, it's running the opportunity for them, but also for me. So I have to pay attention to what other hunters around me are doing. And a lot of times, you know, I'm using the wind direction from their property to benefit me. You know, when I know it's blowing in a certain area, it's going to push those deer out to skirt around them. You know, so it just depends. It's always a chess match.
Yeah, for sure, man. You mentioned that you live in a 1-buck county, which Kansas is 1-buck state. How do you ever? I think managing properties that only allow you to kill 1 buck is very difficult because while we want to shoot a giant, we also recognize, man, I really need to kill off that 8.5-year-old that's 125 inches, just like you said. You know, we want to kill the biggest, maturest, oldest buck that's taking up food and shelter from, you know, potential ones to grow up and get bigger. But we also don't want to pass the 233-inch deer that walks by.
Right.
So how do you manage your properties when you can only kill 1 buck?
Well, you know, I talk about this term loosely, I guess. You know, I do what I can, you know, to try to, I guess, quote unquote, manage the properties, but I can't manage low fence deer and I can't manage other hunters around me. And, you know, so all I can really do is do, you know, what I think's best at the time. And so the year after so in 2018 is when I shot the 230. The year after, I had some really nice bucks, just no shot opportunities at them. And so what I ended up shooting on the last day of the season was a buck that was injured. His leg was actually broken, and he had a spike about 11 inches long on one side, like 3 points on there. He was jacked up. I mean, he was about 6.5. I mean, he was long overdue to be gone. And, you know, and I saw him limping along. It was kind of one of those things to where it was like, if he was younger and I thought, hey, you know, he might develop into something, then, you know, I'd let him walk and just eat a tag for the year. Wasn't a big deal because I had other places to hunt. So it's not like I was just completely out of deer meat. And so, you know, but when I saw that he was injured, he was an old deer, and I was like, you know, he needed to go. Didn't want him reproducing for the next year, even though he probably had already bred, you know, because like I said, this was in January. He probably already bred for the season, but I ended up shooting him. And of course, everyone's like, what are you doing? Like, how do you shoot a 230? And then you turn around and shoot a freaking like 50-inch spike, you know? And anyway, and so, you know, I just felt like it was the right thing to do, you know, and but it's hard. I see deer that are wounded, you know, with crossbow bolts sticking out of them, that are deer that you're going, what are you doing? Like,
you know what I'm saying? Like 2.5-year-old 150.
Yeah, well, I mean, not just that, but I mean, I'm talking, I see some of them that are like 120-inch deer that I'm not even sure are legal, you know, because they're more straight up and not, you know, don't have 13-inch rule outside their ears. And, you know, but part of it too is, I mean, I understand kids are out hunting and, you know, might be their first deer. And, you know, I mean, I get some of that, but other parts of it is, you know, it just makes you put in perspective. You can't manage what other people are going to do, because to them that might be a trophy deer, even though I'm going, do you realize what kind of deer you have running around through this property and that's what you're going to shoot, you know? But, you know, I don't know their excuse. I don't know their reasoning. And I mean, if that's what makes them happy, then great. But it's really hard trying to manage deer. Cause I mean, I run protein feeders. I try to give deer as much resources as I can, you know, to help them meet that potential growth. And, you know, but I hear that all the time. They're like, well, you might just be feeding it for the neighbor. I was like, well, the neighbor will get the benefit of shooting them. I mean, that's just the way it is, you know. And
you're still growing bigger deer all around. Like,
right.
Even if a neighbor shoots one of your deer, you're still creating a healthier deer herd for the long haul, you know?
Right.
And that's what so many guys, like, they want the here and now. Like, they want to kill big deer right
Mm-hmm.
now. And they look at, you know, they watch all these TV shows and they're like, I want to kill a 180. But killing a 180 takes 7 years of running feeders and killing off management deer and trying to manage a doe to buck ratio. And, you know, it takes investing a lot into deer to kill that down the road. And then when their biggest deer gets killed, they're like, well, crap, he's gone. I wasted all that time. No, because you're still investing in your deer herd.
Right. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up with that, is it turns into, well, man, they shot my deer, you know? And it's like, I don't look at it in that perspective, because I'm going, even though I might be putting in more work, or a lot of time, a lot of investment for the deer herd, and this deer might be benefiting from that, and I'm going, man, that's kind of my target buck, and someone shoots him. I don't know what work they've put in. They might have been investing just as much as I have. So I try not to ever get caught up in that, you know, well, you shot my deer. Well, I mean, it's free range. I mean, that's going to happen. You hunt long enough, that will happen. You'll see someone holding the buck that your blood, sweat, and tears and nightmares have been built around, and you know, and you just chalk it up to the next, and you go, man, you know, at least some of these younger up and comers hopefully benefited from the work put in, and you know, you just move on.
Well, and that's what I remember. One time I was in high school and I had this deer, and it was a resident of my grandparents' place, but it was the talk of the town. Like, I was sitting in history class one day, and he was one of my coaches, but he said, "Hey, Dylan, come up here real quick." Called me to his desk, like in the middle of class. And I was like, "Yes, sir. What's going on?" And he said, "I saw the buck this morning." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "I saw it on my way to work." And I'm like, that's how this was a talk of the town, and people knew like
Right.
Dylan's hunting this deer. And we're talking Northwest Arkansas. So, I mean, it was probably 160s, but for Northwest Arkansas, that was a mega giant. And sure enough, somebody else killed him. And I was so beyond mad. Like and my dad set me down and had this real conversation. And, you know, not only like the sportsman talk of like, hey, dude, sportsmen are happy for other sportsmen. Like, if you're a true, authentic, you know, bow hunter, then you're happy for other bow hunters' success. And I was like, but it's my deer. And he's like, no, it's not your deer. Like, it's not. It's a natural resource for anybody and everybody. And that guy, you have no idea. He might think that deer, you know, is his deer. And if you were to kill, like, and so he had that real conversation with me. And so then fast forward, I hunted the same deer in Kansas for like 7 years. And no, 6 years. But I saw him when he was, you know, a year and a half old. And I'm like, oh, he's going to be a giant. And I had him within 40 yards a couple times, let him walk. And then, you know, that year 6.5 where he was just a stud, I had him at 40 yards, couldn't get a shot. And then he just vanished. And I'm like, dang it, he's dead. Like, he's got to be dead. And the property that I'm talking about, the southern border of this property is Oklahoma. So they get a week before me for rifles. Their rifle season opens a week early. And I was driving into my spot one day, and the hunter that hunts Oklahoma, we start talking, and he's like, well, dude, check out this deer I shot last week. And I'm like, don't do it. And he pulls his phone out, and sure enough, he shot that buck with a rifle. But I can truly say I was happy for the guy. Like, I wasn't, you know, because in my mind, I'm like, well, that deer still bred a whole bunch of other bucks. And sure enough, those genetics are all still running around. Like, even though I invested so much time and effort and money into that deer, by hunting them the way I hunted him, I still created a healthier deer herd. I still, you know, in the long run, I'm going to still be happy with it. You know what I mean? So we just have to look forward to the, you know, 6-7 years down the road, not the here and right now, you know?
Yeah. And it's easier said than done. I mean, it's hard, you know. I had that happen the year before last, different property. I had a really young buck. I mean, he was probably, I was figuring about 3 years old. He was already 19 points, unbelievable deer. And me and one of the neighbors that across the creek that was seeing him too all the time, he had agreed. We both agreed, hey, you know, we're gonna let him walk. I literally had this deer twice, once at 15 yards, once at 17 yards, and let him walk. And he ended up getting poached later that season.
Oh my gosh! And, see, I can't be okay with that. Like,
well, this is what makes it worse is, you know, is they just cut the head off and left the body, you know, and so I'm like, it, you know, I don't do well with poachers. I've had to experience way too much of that, you know, but that it's just sickening because, you know, you're trying to manage this herd, right? Of going, man, this buck's got potential to be a mega giant. It was in the same location that my buddy across the creek shot a 200 incher, which same genetics. I mean, they were almost identical at the age, from his buck's age to that one. And so you knew it was going to be a special deer, and you know, for it to go out like that, you're just like, man, it's a heartbreaker. So sometimes you're almost like, man, what's the point? I've got these idiots that aren't going to do things the right way, you know, out there shooting deer at night, and you shoot them with a rifle in an archery only county, you know, shooting them on property that you're not supposed to be hunting on. I mean, it never ends, but it's heartbreaking, but all you can do is, you know, press on and, you know, just do the best you can. But it's,
that's the kind of thing where I go from being a Christian to fighting somebody real quick. Like, I mean, because like you said, dude, it's not only it's immoral, it's unethical, it's illegal, it's stealing. I mean, it is stealing from, you know, not only you, but the government, the state. I mean, You're putting a bad taste in everybody's mouth about hunters all across the country. I mean, it's disgusting, honestly.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because me and my wife had this conversation years back over another deer that got shot illegally, and she was just like, she's like, it's just a deer. What's the big deal? And I was like, well, the big deal is it's something that, I have a passion for. The hunting community is getting smaller. They're trying to take hunting rights away. This is something that I grew up doing that I love to do immensely. I love getting my kids involved in hunting. I was like, and now you got somebody out here that wants to break the rules, instead of abide by the rules and just do it the right way. I was like, it just drives me insane, and
Yeah.
it's just, what do you do? There will always be poachers. I mean, it'll never end. And, it's unfortunately, it's just something we have to deal with. But a lot of times that's why I like showing, people are like, why do you always post pictures of the deer? Some of the deer that you see, like I say, I don't show the mega giants just because I know how that world works. But I show a lot of decent bucks, and people are like, why would you show those? And I'm like, because for one, that might help a game warden in the case whenever, there was a guy, he shot one here in North Texas and said he shot it in Oklahoma, but somebody had a trail cam picture of it and recognized the deer because of how characteristic it was, 196-inch deer. And he ended up getting busted because of that, because someone had trail camera pictures of him and posted it and somebody recognized it, and so I was like, and I'm like, who am I hiding it from? My neighbors have seen these deer too, so it's like,
Yeah.
But I don't know.
One time I caught a poacher. I was in the tree stand and I had a decoy out, and it was one of those Dave Smith decoys, super realistic bucks. And I'm sitting in the tree stand, and this property is one tree line, so you can just see everywhere. Like, you can see everything.
Right.
And this car drives down the road, and this is a little tractor path of a road, like nobody, and it runs into a river. So nobody drives down this road ever. I mean, only the farmers would to get the combines in and out. I mean, it was never driven down because there's literally no reason to. And I'm sitting there hunting, this truck's driving down the road, and I'm like, the heck is he doing? And he stops, rolls the window down. I see a rifle come out of the window at that decoy. And I just start yelling because I'm in the tree. Like, you have no idea what's going to happen. So I just start yelling. And he rolls the window up real quick and speeds off. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, you got to be kidding me, dude. That was the one time I was like really mad, but also a little scared because your heart rate's pumping. You see a rifle pointed in your direction. And dude, it got me going for a minute, but yeah, I basically climbed down and left after that because I'm like, well, I just started hooping and hollering and yelling, so all the deer are gone anyways. But
yeah, and it's crazy to me, I mean, there's some people, they grew up, that's normal life to them, is poaching deer, road hunting deer, spotlighting deer, and I'm just like, but I don't understand how someone doesn't take into consideration the ramifications of going, hey, what if there's a hunter back there in the woods and I shoot and the bullet hits him and kills? You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
So you're doing two stupid things. For one, you're trying to poach a deer. For two, you could injure somebody or kill somebody, not knowing that they're there. It's just reckless, man. And, it drives me nuts. That's the reason there was a big push. They were trying to get Collin County to, there's 4 counties left in Texas that are archery only, and Collin County that I'm in is one of them. And there was people trying to make a push to open a gun season here, and all the bow hunters come out in full force, and luckily it got shot down. But it's the same thing. It's like, guys, it's getting too populated of an area here, for y'all to be shooting a rifle. I mean, we're just reckless with guns, obviously. And, and if they ain't got enough sense not to poach deer, you definitely don't want them trying to do it with a firearm.
With a gun. Yeah.
Right.
No kidding.
So,
guys, there's one fabric that if you're not wearing, you absolutely should be. It's a magic fabric. It changes everything about the way you layer, everything about the way you dress, everything about the way you hunt, and that is Merino Wool. I couldn't even begin to tell you all of the benefits of Merino Wool, and I'm going to miss some for sure. But guys, whether it's summer or whether it's winter, This is going to keep you cool in the summer. It's moisture wicking. It's going to pull the moisture away from your body, but it's also going to hold your heat in the winter. It is antimicrobial. It doesn't smell. It doesn't hold scent like other fabrics does. So if you're out on a 5-day hunt, you don't have access to a washer, this is not going to hold your scent. It's not going to get stinky and nasty. It's also quick drying. You can hang this up in your tent. You can hang it up on a clothesline. It's going to dry really quick. But the coolest part about merino, in my opinion, is that when it gets wet, it still maintains its warmth properties. So if there's a light rain or a snow and this gets wet, it's still going to keep me warm. There's no itch. It's non-allergenic. It's an amazing fabric. Minus 33. I stumbled upon minus 33 by accident. I was on backcountry.com and they were having a blowout sale. I needed some new merino for a hunt that was coming up. And so I dove in. I bought it. And when I got it, it was the softest, best merino I have ever felt in my entire life. I've not worn anything but minus 33 socks for everyday life, whether I'm hunting, hiking, or just, out for the day. I haven't worn anything but minus 33 socks in over a year and a half. Every single day I'm wearing their underwear. Every single time I'm out hunting, whether it's 100 or whether it's 5, I'm wearing some sort of beanie to cover up my chrome dome and to keep that covered up and warm or cool, whether if it's in the summer. But also that UV protectant. I like to wear it in the summer. Guys, minus 33 does merino, in my opinion, better than anybody else does it. Go check out minus 33 for all your merino wool. And if you haven't ever tried merino, guys, you are missing out. It will change the way you layer. It will change the way you hunt. Go check out Merino Wool and go check out minus 33. All right, so let's jump into the story, man. 200 and you said 33 inches?
Mm-hmm.
233 inches. Tell me the story.
Yeah. So this was back in 2018. It was a property I really didn't have any history with this deer at all. A buddy of mine had called and said, "Hey, man, there's a lease opportunity on this property. It's about 20 miles east of kind of northeast of where I live. So it was close by. I knew the property or knew the area real well, knew there was big deer that traveled down this creek. And he's like, "You interested in getting on?" So I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I get on the lease on November 1st. Okay. So I've already lost the month of October to begin with. I get on November 1st and with 3 other people. And so this was all of our first time. So it was like, okay, everybody just, I had already done, gotten an aerial map and just looked at some areas that I thought would be good and, travel corridors. Until you put boots on the ground.
How many acres is this?
So this was about 600 wooded acres.
Oh,
and, yeah. And so, and there was a creek that run through it, another creek that kind of, cut off on one end that wasn't quite as big or as deep, but it was just a guessing game at that point of going, a lot of times you want to get close to a creek where they naturally want to travel, but it was going, man, I've got a short period of time. The rut's about to start. It's actually already in the pre-rut. So my first thought was, well, instead of wasting time just wandering around, I'm going to go look for rubs and scrapes, right? Because I already knew those were going to be established at that point in time. So I just start walking down. I find some nice rubs on some trees. And then finally I come across one. It's about a 10-inch diameter tree, just shredded. And I was like, okay, this could be what we're looking for. So I took a cellular camera, put it on the tree. That night, this buck showed up, coming and was scent checking that tree. And I was just like, holy crap. And I knew he was big at the time. I guessed we kind of all, the guys on the lease kind of all took a guess what we thought he was. And I thought he was around 223. And anyway, and so the question got brought up is, hey, do you tell your lease mates? Because I was the first one to get a picture of him, obviously, because he come right to that. That was his spot. And I was like, well, of course, they're going to see him on that kind of acreage. And so, I shared with them, and everybody was like, holy crap, where was that? And then they're all trying to move over to, the spot where I was trying to hunt. And
that's when you just say, is in the northwest corner when it's actually the southwest.
Yeah. And so, anyway, then, so once I got that picture of him, of course, it was at night. I'm like, okay, well, at least I don't know if he lives on the property, but I knew he was in the area. Right. And, because it was at like 10 o'clock at night when it came through. So I don't know if he had already traveled a couple of hours from, a neighboring property or what. So then it was just trying to figure out, how do I work backwards and figure out where he's coming from, and you're also at that time of the year where they're traveling further distances. So I'm going, man, I don't know. Did he just walk 6 miles tonight? Look, searching for some does coming into estrus early. I mean, there was a whole lot of unknown. But one of the guys, a buddy of mine that actually hunted the property years previously, when I showed him the picture, he goes, man, I think that might be this buck that we had on camera, which he looked totally different. The year before, or I guess 2 years before, he was like, just had a ton of palmation, wasn't as wide, but just real dense. And so I was like, man, I don't know that that's the same deer, because he didn't look like the same deer at first. And anyway, had a huge drop tine the year that I had him on camera. He didn't have a drop tine in the pictures of years previous. And it was definitely much wider, but didn't have as much palmation or anything. And so I was kind of like, man, if it is the same deer, then I know he lives around on this property. And so just kind of started working backwards, taking trail cameras, putting them out, and then putting together a timeline of, when he's passing these cameras, and, which was kind of telling me which direction he was coming from. And so I kind of worked backwards. And so it took me about 2 weeks of kind of moving some cameras around and getting inventory and figuring out, okay, I think this is his bedding area. And then it was on, and of course all the other guys were going in and hunting at this time. They've seen the buck, and I'm like, well, there's no point for me to go in there and hunt, because it was all nocturne. It was all nighttime pictures. And my first thought was, I don't even know if this deer is going to be killable. I don't know if he'll even show up in daylight. And especially now with other hunters, because there was local hunters, hunters around the property. There was our hunters, our lease mates were hunting. So it's already getting a bunch of pressure. And I'm like, this deer may stay nocturnal all year. And anyway, and so and then on November 13th, I got the first daylight picture of him. And I was like, it's go time, baby. And so I called my boss, put in 2 weeks of vacation, which was all the vacation I had. And he's like, well, where are you going? I was like, I'm going to kill a world-class deer. And he's like, what? And I was like, I'm spending all my vacation time. I'm going to hunt. I said, hopefully, maybe I get lucky and I go and use 1 day of vacation. I killed him the first day. But if not, I'm hunting from now until Thanksgiving. Dude, I hunted every day, all but 1 day. And that was the day before Thanksgiving, just because we had something to do for my daughter. So I didn't go. And of course he showed up at that stand.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. At 7:45 in the morning. And I was just like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. And, anyway, but so from the 13th, from November 13th, I hunted every single day. On November 17th, I was hunting a completely different stand. So the guys, my lease mates, they were all hunting, but they were on the other end of the property. And so, of course, I'm trying to use, tactics of going, how with all this hunting pressure, how am I going to try to outsmart this deer? Well, so it was a little bit of a southeast wind. So what I did is I went and got on the far south end of the property. Okay. And I had an idea of where he was bedding. So they were on the other side of that. And so I knew their wind was going to blow into his bedding area. And he definitely wasn't going to walk out to them when he could smell them. And it worked like a charm. It ended up pushing him, and he come walking down south, or down where I was. And I had already found a scrape that he had. I'd had some other pictures of him coming through there, and another rub. And this was at a different tree different location than where I had him before. And anyway, he comes walking down the trail. His scrape was at 20 yards on the dot. It was kind of a hanging hunt stand that I went in and put up. And I was like, dude, it's about to happen. I can see his legs coming down the trail, and then I see his antlers, and I'm like, dude, that's him. I was like, so everything's knocked. everything's got my GoPro on, ready to go. He comes walking down the trail, and before he gets to the little clear opening, he turns for whatever reason and cuts out next to this little drainage ditch. And at this point, he's at 45 yards because I'd already ranged all the trees. And I see him, he steps out right at the edge of it. Not a real clear shot, but I see him turn his head. And dude, I was just like, that was the first time in person seeing him. And I was just like, holy crap. And so then I have a decision to make. I'm like, if he takes a couple steps forward, do I take a 45-yard shot on a really alert deer? You know, and I'm going, dude, I've been hunting all this time. So I'm going, I don't know if I'll ever get this chance again. So I get everything ready to go. And for whatever reason, he just turned around, walked back up in the woods the way he came. And I'm actually glad that he didn't give me the opportunity to shoot, because I don't know if I would even hit the deer that far. I was shaking so bad. I was just like, oh my God. And so anyway, so now fast forward to basically a week later on Thanksgiving Day. So I'd hunted all the days in between there except for one, and that was when he showed up again at daylight. And then Thanksgiving morning, I got up. We were hosting Thanksgiving at my house, and my wife's like, hey, don't be late. Got to be back by noon. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go hunt the morning, and I'll be home. My last vacation day that I'd burned all my vacation days, and so I was off for Thanksgiving. So I was out of days. So it was like, it was basically now or never. Yeah. And, anyway, so I go in, get in super early that morning, see a lot of bucks moving, a lot of good activity, and then all of a sudden it just dies off. I don't see anything. So I look down at my watch, and it's like almost 9 o'clock, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna hunt till 9:30 and get up and go home. And well, another buddy of mine was hunting, and he texts me like right at 9 and says, dude, I just saw the drop time buck chasing hard on a doe, and he was headed south. And he's like a 3/4 of a mile from me. So I'm going, what's the chances of that buck chasing that doe that far
yeah.
and running in right in front of me, right? And that time of year, you're using a bow. So, you know as well as anybody that the hardest thing to do is once they're in chase mode, now trying to get them to stop, And anyway, so I'm sitting there thinking, well, I might as well pack up and go. I was like, chances of them coming over here, they'll zigzag through the woods and be no telling where. And so I'm kind of just sitting there thinking for a second, and I just hear crashing coming through the timberline coming down, and I'm sitting next to the original tree that I got the first picture of him at, and because I had some does that was coming into that feeder, and so I thought, well, he may come into that to scent check for does, but he texted me and said, hey, I saw him chasing hard on a doe, and they just come barreling down this fence row, and I can't tell what it is at first, and then there's kind of some tall grass pasture, and I see this doe running. And so I'm looking over, and I'm sitting in a ground blind, like you know what a ghost blind is? It's like the mirror panels.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in one of those and sitting on the ground. I'm up against a creek so that I knew no deer could come up from behind me, and then overseeing this rub and scrape that he had in this feeder. Anyway, so I look and I see them. I hear the running through the trees, and I look over and I see this doe. Well, she's running down this fence line and then turns and starts running straight for me. And I'm going, she's getting closer and closer. And I'm like, she's not going to see me. I mean, literally it's mirror panels. Like it just looks like leaves and brush there. So I was like, she's about to barrel over me. And, so I'm kind of like tensing up thinking, dude, she's about to run right over the top of me, thinking that I'm just brushed there. And, she runs and stops 8 yards in front of me. And she's panting, and she's turning around looking back. And I mean, I can see her eyelashes blinking, bro. I mean, it was intense. And she's panting so hard. And so I'm frozen. Like I'm just sitting here with my bow in my hand, just staring at her.
My gosh, I'm nervous. Why do you have me nervous?
Dude,
You're just telling me.
Yeah, no, dude, it gets 10 times worse. So so I'm sitting here just shaking out of adrenaline, because if she wouldn't have just made a little bit of a turn, dude, I would have got trampled by a deer. It would have been like the worst ever. But anyway, and so I'm just sitting there staring at her, just frozen. Like I didn't even blink because she was so close. I was thinking she'll see me blink. And anyway, she's looking back, her tongue's hanging out, she's panting, and I can hear grunting and running coming in from the direction she came from. And so I'm trying to look like out of the corner of my eye, like as hard as I can, because she's so close I can't turn my head to look. So I'm like looking out the corner of my eye, and finally she turns, bolts, takes off, and then loops back around. And when she does, I look over and I just see this monster running behind her, huge drop tine. And I'm like, oh my God, it's him. And it happened so fast. I mean, he was running so fast that, you know, he was basically just on her tail, but he was luckily far enough back that when she stopped, he wasn't like right on top of me too, because I wouldn't even got to draw him back. Well, so the first thing that comes through my head is when I look over, I'm going, he's about to be where she just was. He's going to be 8 yards from me. This is basically a frontal shot. I don't even know what to do at this point. I'm going, do I draw back? And, you know, and so I'm just kind of frozen. Like, I think he would have literally just ran right by me if he would have taken that direction. But whenever she took off and looped around, it changed his angle to try to cut her off. So he come through and basically 45'd and was kind of angling away, quartering away from me. And he cuts through and literally is running right past the tree, the big tree that had the rub, the very first one I got a picture of him on, and I'd already ranged it. It was 40 yards. And I'm going, now I'm in this predicament again. Oh. It's a little bit farther than a shot you're really comfortable taking. But it's going, dude, this is my last day. He's moving quick. I'm like, if I can get him stopped, I was pretty comfortable I could make the shot. And, you know, but because it was happening so fast that adrenaline hadn't purely hit. You know, I didn't have like a pure, like, oh my God, I'm freaking out kind of deal. And so I draw back and I'm like, man, and just like progressively getting louder, and he ain't stopping. But now he's got his head down. He's kind of like to a slow trot. And anyway, and so I see the tree that he's about to pass, and I just lead a little bit on his front shoulder, and I squeeze off on the release, and I see the arrow, the luminot flying, and he's still moving, and it goes in right behind the ribs and passes through on the far side shoulder. And I was just like, and he runs off, and I see him go around where the doe went, and I'm just like, dude, did that just happen? Like, what, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, what in the world? And then all I could think was, did I hit him too far back? Even though he was quartering pretty hard and I was pretty confident it was going to be a lethal shot, I'm going, oh my God, please, please, please kill this deer. You know what I mean? It's like, because there would be nothing worse than injuring a deer of that magnitude and not finding it, you know? And so, anyway, I'm now adrenaline hits, dude, and I'm shaking. I'm just like, oh my God, I don't even know what to do with myself. Like, just trying to gather myself. Like, it happened so fast. I'm just kind of like, what is going on? So I was like, all right, well, I got to get up and check my arrow. So I can still see the luminot laying on the ground. So I knew it was full pass through. I was pretty sure it went up through the liver. So I was like, I know he'll die. It's just a matter of how far did they run, right? And anyway, and so I go up, check my arrow, and it's just coated in blood. So I start looking on the ground, and blood's just poured out on the trail. And so I start feeling better. But until you have your hands on them, if you've ever lost deer, you know that feeling where you're like, dude, just please let me find this deer. Yeah. So I go down the little ravine that he went up and loop around, and it's kind of this big open pasture, and I'm like on a little strip of trees. And so I'm looking across the pasture, and I don't see anything, and I'm looking at the blood, and it's poured out like crazy. And so I'm like, all right, so I get my binoculars. I'm kind of scanning around the field because I definitely didn't want to bump him if he had bedded down. And I'm scanning it around, and I see antlers sticking up out of the grass on one side. Oh. And so I walk up, I make sure he's not breathing, and then go up and put my hands on him. And I'm just like, oh, what have I done? You know? And dude. So, of course, the first thing I do is I text my wife. I was like, I'm going to be late.
I'm not going to make it.
Yeah, I was like, and so I pull up to Thanksgiving lunch, which we were hosting at my house, or family from all over. I pull up with its monster in the back of my truck. And of course, everybody comes out. My kids are freaking out, taking pictures of it. And of course, they know, I'd put in almost 120 hours in 2 weeks on this deer. And, and so it was it was a surreal moment, man, and it's one of those things to where, how it is as a hunter, that's like the moments you dream of. You always sit and daydream and sit in the stand is, man, maybe today's the day that this mega giant walks out, and
dude, so
dream came true, man.
So in that moment, I was originally going to ask you like how you even hold it together with 233 inches of bone in front of you, but yours was even more intense because you thought you were going to get steamrolled by a doe, and then you had a stare down match. How in the world do you hold it all together in that moment?
Dude, it was great. So the funny part is, I had my GoPro, I had my Tacticam, I had all this stuff to where I was like, man, I'm going to start recording my hunts and my kill shots and all this. Forgot to turn any of it on. I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? I was just like, and then of course the first thing, the first thing that happens is the deer kind of went viral, like in my local community. Right. And it was just going crazy. So then there were some, publications that come out and was asking for the articles and all this stuff. And so it was in North American Whitetail magazine. It was in Texas Trophy Hunters magazine. It was on the cover of Buckmasters magazine. So all these publications started coming out, and what a bunch of them asked me is, hey, did you get it on film? And I was like, well, that would have been great if I wasn't freaking out so much that I forgot to do any of that, and so, so it was just, it was just, it was a moment you live for, right? Just that pure adrenaline dump to where, to me as a hunter, that's like, that feeling never gets old. That rush is where it just drives you to want to go back again. It's almost like that feeling you had when you shot your first deer and how amped up you were. But then to shoot one of a caliber like that, of course, I'm on cloud nine. I'm going, dude, I just shot this amazing deer. I've got, it's going to be on the cover of Buckmasters and North American Whitetails. Like, hey, this may make it onto the cover of our magazine. And of course, guess who shot the world record that same year, 2018, Luke Brewster. And so North American Whitetail, they called and they're like, hey, you're not going to make the cover. We just had a world
Luke
record
on it.
hit the ground. And I was like, I'm cool with mine. But and that was what was mind blowing to me is I'm going, I think of how I felt on a 233 and he shot one 100 inches bigger than mine. And I'm going, I just couldn't even fathom that,
Have you got to meet Luke?
I haven't. No.
I was supposed to go. Phenomenal guy. Like, he's the type of guy where, like, you hear him talk and he tells the stories and you get to, have a conversation with him and you're like, I'm glad you killed it. Like, you're the kind of guy like that you want to see holding the world record.
Yeah, couldn't happen to a better person.
Yeah, absolutely. That was also the same year that the butcher buck was killed here in Kansas, the number 2.
It was.
Just that freak bushy deer on top. And he's just an incredible guy too. So what's funny about that is we were at the Pope and Young convention, and Jason and I were standing there, having conversation with people and just, welcoming people into the show and having a good time. And these 3 guys are standing there, and Jason walks up, and we're in a room with 170 of the biggest trophies ever taken with archery equipment. There was, 10 new world records in the room. And Jason goes, so if you could kill any one of these in the whole room, which one would you kill? And this kid points to the butcher buck, and my boss is like, really? That's out of all these, that's the one you would kill? And he said, looking back, he's like, I'm really thankful. I'm like, that's the ugliest deer ever. But he's like, yeah, I'd probably kill it again if I could. And he's like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, I'm Brian Butcher. I'm the one that shot that deer the first time. So it was a funny story. Yeah. But he's like, I'm really glad I didn't say anything bad about that deer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that was a crazy looking deer. I remember that. But yeah, no, I was supposed to go to the Boone and Crockett big award ceremony they had, but just couldn't shake loose to go. But I know they were both there, and so. But no, I haven't gotten to meet either one of them. But yeah, those bucks are incredible. But I mean, that's a lot of people say that to me. They're like, "Well, what do you do now that you've shot a 230?" I was like, "Well, there's multiple people in the world that have shot a 300 incher. Why not aim for the sky, right?" And
that was my next question. Like, because you mentioned people, now they automatically assume you got to kill bigger ones, and so then when you shoot one smaller, they're like, "Really? You shoot that next?"
Right.
Like, how do you bounce back? Like, and I don't mean bounce back as in got to kill one bigger now, but that mentality of like, well, why shoot a 140? Because I've shot a 233 before. Like, where do you go from here? You know what I mean?
It's funny you say that, because I still understand that a buck of that caliber is a once in a lifetime deer.
Yeah.
And so, that's what I tell people. I'm like, granted, there's good genetics, but I may not ever see a deer that comes close to that. Now, let me say that I've got pictures of one that probably surpasses that.
Send me the exact coordinates to that location, and I'll be there in a little bit.
Yeah, it's so they're out there. The guy that would have had the state record, he's only about an hour, kind of northwest of our location. He shot what would have been the state record at the time, which was like 272. And of course he poached it, so it was all for nothing. And but right now the state record, I think, is at 282, shot down at the King Ranch last year. But
well, I tell people too, like, the moment an NFL quarterback wins the Super Bowl, they don't go, "Well, I can't ever do anything greater than this, so I retire." Like, that's not
right.
They keep playing the game because they love the game. Like, and that's something a lot of people don't get, is like, just because I've done that doesn't mean like I still don't love the game. I still don't love the chase. I don't, doesn't mean I'm going to hang it up and say, well, I'm never going to kill one bigger. So,
yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, I just love to hunt, and I love to hunt whitetails. And so, and granted, I've shot much smaller deer, to where, and then people kind of look at me like, well, why would you shoot that? And I'm like, well, if you took the ones I've shot off the table, if you didn't know, would you question it then? And the sad part is I think a lot of people would. The hunting community is really bad about that. Instead of just going, hey, man, if that's what makes you happy, dude, cool. But people are so quick to judge of like, well, why would you shoot that deer? It's like, because that's what I wanted to shoot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
it goes back to like not knowing the situation at all. Like, you don't know what happened. Like, you don't know what, dude, I can go through my life and talk about several times I shot a deer where, if it hadn't played out the way it did, I wouldn't have shot it. Like, but like, my daughter was born November 7th. So that the year she was born put a major dampener on my abilities to hunt. And so when I went out and, a 125 steps out, I'm like, yeah, dude, you're it. 'Cause I don't know how much more I'm going to get to hunt,
Right.
Last year I shot I don't want to say a small buck, but it wasn't anything to brag about in Oklahoma. And people are like, why'd you shoot that deer? And I'm like, because my 4-year-old son was with me. Like, we were sitting in a tree stand together, and I had a 130-inch whitetail at 20 yards with a bow and a 4-year-old in a tree. Like, that was a massive accomplishment because I couldn't get him to be still and be quiet, and so there's just so many things. Like, we don't know why they did that, and it's their tag. Like, quit questioning them,
Yeah, and you see it all the time, and it's so frustrating. Like my daughter, she shot her first deer when she was 10, and somebody, like, I had posted, and somebody had made that post, and they were like, why would you shoot that deer? And it's like, well, first of all, it's her first deer, and she's 10, and you should have seen the first deer I shot. I mean, it's like, you want to make fun of somebody, you'd really made fun of me if the first one I shot.
The first deer I shot still had milk on its lips, and I threw it over my shoulders and walked out.
Yeah, and it's like, but I was so proud of that deer because it was my first deer, and so, I look at that, because people will say that to, adult hunters that post something. You don't know that that's not their first deer. and just started hunting later in life, and that's my biggest pet peeve with hunters is why they just can't be, they just can't be complimentary of people. It's always got to be, well, this is better than that. And then you get into well, bow hunters is the only way that's only real hunting, not gun hunting. And, you get into that whole debate of things. And it's just, I don't knock anybody for any of it. When I started hunting, I started with a gun, because obviously I wasn't big enough to pull back a bow. And so, so I'm not going to knock anybody for gun hunting because that's what I started out doing. Now I primarily bow hunt now, but I'm not going to put somebody down for gun hunting, and so
for sure.
It's just, I don't know, man. What do you do?
So what's your number one tip? I ask all my guests, what's your number one tip for somebody to kill? Maybe it's their first buck, but maybe it's, maybe they're chasing, like you said, they have one deer nailed down. But what's your number one tip for deer hunting for somebody to take and make themselves a better hunter with this fall?
Oh, man, that's a tough one, because I know a lot of places all over the U.S. Are different. The way you approach hunting, the way you hunt are different for different people. But I would probably say in general, just be patient. You got to have patience because I know probably for 95% of the population that has gotten on board with using trail cameras and especially cellular cameras, and you get a picture of a deer and they immediately want to go and hunt that afternoon or that next morning. And, you just got to always remember that every time you walk into the woods, a stand location, that deer, the deer herd or the deer you're hunting might not see you or hear you, going to, but when they come through at night and they're feeding, they can smell your scent on the ground and they can tell how recent it's been. And they know that equals danger. And so, I don't know how many times it's happened where someone will call me and they'll say, dude, I got this mega giant on camera. How do I kill him? I was like, you need to wait until you have him on camera frequently, like multiple times, because if you just rush in there now, he might not come back for a day or two. And then when he does, he might smell you or see you getting out of your stand. And now you've ruined the opportunity. So, I would just say, just be patient, but just try to learn the little subtleties of knowing when to go in and hunt. Like if I put out a mock scrape and I've got a buck I'm after that comes to that, two days in a row, 100% I'm hunting that third day, as long as the wind direction's right, because you're trying to catch them in that pattern. You'll always have the one-offs where deer just do random deer things, but yeah. And I would say probably the biggest thing is people understanding the wind. You can, and I'm not trying to knock it for anybody, but I don't care what scent elimination you use. I don't care what you wash your clothes in. I don't care if you build a fire and stand there and get smoke all over you. I don't care if you smoke a cigarette. It doesn't matter what you do. You will never be able to 100% beat a deer's nose. I mean, that's how they survive. And they know when something's not right. And so, I'm not trying to say there's products that don't help eliminate some of that, but you're never going to 100% beat a deer's nose. And so you have to use the correct wind, or you're out of the game, and a lot of people don't even realize it. They're like, well, I hunted the right wind and I didn't see any deer. Well, the problem is you might not realize that the deer can smell you 400 yards away, depending how hard the wind's blowing. They can smell you, a few hundred yards away and smelled you and rerouted before they ever got to you. So you didn't see any deer because they smelled you, and so,
right.
And it's not always, they don't always blow at you when they smell you. I mean, I've watched some savvy deer, get a little bit of an off wind. They knew something was right. And it's the weirdest thing. Like they'll creep their head down and just like kind of like duck through it's like they're almost like a scolded dog, where they know they didn't do something right. It was cool. It was really cool to watch it, just understanding how whitetails interact and how they associate danger and how they skirt that. It can be extremely elusive to where if I wouldn't have physically seen him, I never heard him or anything, but I physically see him and he crouches down, goes through the grass, dips down off in this creek and just vanishes. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible. If I would have been turned around the other way, he would have slipped through there and I'd never known he was there. And that was I had a swirling wind and he caught just enough of it. He knew something wasn't right,
Yeah. Well, that's what, going back to that's maturity as a sportsman, to be patient and wait until the time is right and then go in and do it. But yeah, so guys, this fall, be patient. Don't rush in and try to kill them at the first sign of big deer. Be patient, be mature, and wait till it's your time to go in and kill them. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Chad, thank you so much for coming on. Dude, go out and kill a 240
brother.
this year so we can have you back on and hear that incredible story. But guys, thanks for listening. You guys have an incredible week.